Morning everyone. In yesterday's lecture we started with essential evolutionary totality, and in short we discuss about what is essential evolutionary totality. So we will continue that topic while taking the case when we are treating the patient homeopathically, then it is necessary to take the case. It is essential to take the details of the patient to find out details about his mental state, about his physical state since the birth of the patient. So, to according to Mr. Dhaule, he introduced the new concept how we should have construct our totality. He introduced this new concept, that is essential evolutionary totality. That is, since birth up to the present state of the person, we have to take details, and when we have to take details about his mental and physical state, then only we can able to find out the patient's mental state, his disposition, his predisposition, his diathesis, his temperament, his miasm behind, what is the miasm behind his condition, what is the miasmatic background about his family. So all these, to find out all these things, it is necessary to take the case in detail. And when we take the case, when we take all these details of the patient, then and then only we can able to find out the exact simillimum. Otherwise, our selection of simillimum may go wrong. So when we taking the history of the patient from the birth, the patient express various events. He represents the various events from the birth to the present state, and out of those events, it is nothing but a movie. As we are seeing, when we watch the movie, then in that we watch the whole life story of one person. In the same way, while case taking, we are listening the life story of our patient from birth to the present state. And while expressing, when examines a living organism in its circumstances, we can see over a period of time many important events occur in its life. So when we go through all the events which the patient express, we should go in detail about the important events which affect the patient mentally. It affects the patient on his mental state as well as on his physical body. So these conditions, these circumstances, we can find out, and all about all these events, we take the details of that events. It may be concomitants, it may be modalities, it may be at emotional level, at physical level, what, how the patient reacts or how the patient handle that situation. It is very much important to know person, to know the patient as a person, and these are the resultant of interactions of the organism with the environment. So how the person react to that event, These are the interactions of that organism with the environment or with the situation, with the events which we face. The events should be correlated to concomitants and modalities to understand the events in totality. So we should correlate, we should find out the concomitant, is there any concomitant symptoms, is there any modalities, so that we get in detail about all details about that event. So to find out the important events, important circumstances since childhood up to the present state, we have to do cross-sectional study of that event. We have to find out in detail all the things related to that event, and then only we get the proper event totality, because it may affect the person at his mental state, at his physical state. Then line of causation. What may be the cause behind the person's present state? How we should find out the cause? So the middle longitudinal line, with the help of middle longitudinal line, we can find out the cause. That is, first one is predisposition. Predisposition. So what is predisposition? It is nothing but the previous we get it with the help of family history. Then after taking the in detail the family history, we get or we can reach towards the predisposition of the patient. Is there any, what is the miasmatic background, what is the, how the patient's family is? So we can able to find out with the help of predisposition what may be the reason, because with the help of predisposition we can get the inherent state, the tendency, and it's all it was indicated by the family medical history, and also the person's pattern of illness. So with the family medical history and person's pattern of illness, we can get the predisposition of the patient. As for example, it was given in the next slide. For example, the father is psychotubercular, family father mother or tubercular, grandfather is having history of tuberculosis, diabetes, then mother is having history of hypertension, diabetes mellitus. Then in the past history, we find the patient was suffering from primary tuberculosis. The father of the patient is also having history of hypertension and diabetes. So with these medical history of the family as well as the past medical history of the patient, we can reach towards the predisposition of the person, as well as to find out the disposition. The, what is disposition? Anyone? Yes. What is disposition?
Slightest change in the state of health.
Yes.
Slightest change in the state of health.
Uh, yes. Disposition, it is nothing but a tendency of the person. It is the natural expressions at his mental level, at his emotional level, or his mood. So it is the tendency of the person. For example, with the help of predisposition and disposition, we get the tendencies. Means what is tendency? The if the father and mother is having diabetes, then it is not the tendency, or it is not the, if the father is having diabetes mellitus, then it is not necessary the child may have the diabetes, because it was not the tendency. When it become tendency, repeatedly for three, 4 generations we have the same type of suffering, then it become tendency. So we can also get the tendency of the family with the, when we take in detail the family history. What is the tendency of the family? Is there history of cancer? So we said that there is tendency of cancer in the family. The cancer is for two or more than 2 generations. Then if there is history of any illness, diabetes or hypertension, it is also for 2 generations or more than 2 generations, then we said that there is tendency of diabetes or hypertension. In the same way, with the disposition we find out, this is about the, we can find out what is the predisposition with the help of family history. And this, with the help of disposition we can find out the tendency of the person's reaction, or the tendency of the person. So how he was mentally, how he was emotionally, uh, or how was his mood when his mood or her mood changes. So it is nothing but a characteristic attitude of a person or tendency to act in a specific way. So disposition is nothing but the tendency, the way how the person reacts every time or most of the time. This is the tendency of that person. For example, if teachers are repeatedly asked to write down the notes, but the students, they are not writing down the notes. So this is the tendency of the patient, students. Am I right? That not to write down the, or not to listen, not to follow the teacher's advice. Is it correct? So this is the disposition, and it is a natural or acquired habit or characteristic tendency in a person or thing. So most of the time it is a natural habit, or it is the characteristic tendency of the person, because each person represent himself in a separate manner, in a unique manner, with his or her characteristic behavior. And the representation of the person with his behavior, with his emotions, with his mood, with his mental state, with his reaction to that situation, this all is nothing but the disposition. In short, with the help of disposition, we can able to understand how the person is, what is the personality of that patient. So this is about the disposition. So while taking the case, these predispositions and dispositions, when we take the in detail about the history of the patient, is he anxious, is he mild, VP, sympathetic or sensitive, this, with the help of this, we can able to find out the patient or a person, how he is, how his personality is. Is he anxious most of the time, is he or she is mild, is there weeping tendency most of the time, easily weeps, the sympathetic nature of the patient, most of the time he or she is sympathetic, there is sensitiveness. So these things which help us to find out the personality, how the patient as a person is. So this is important. Why it is important to take the history of the patient in detail? So these are the reasons to know the patient as a person, then to know the tendencies in the family. We have to find out the predisposition and disposition of the patient. Then about physical generals of the patient. After disposition, it comes the physical generals. So which things came under physical general? All you know. Which things came? The desire, aversion, then yes, which things came under physical general? Anyone? Which things came under physical general? Third year students, they will give immediately the answer. Yes, while taking the case, which things? Yes, Varda.
Ma'am, desire, thirst, appetite, sleep, dream.
So under physical general, it comes desire, aversion, cravings, then thirst, appetite, all the excretions like perspiration, urine, bowel, menstruation, sleep, dream. So it all came under the also the most important thing is thermals. They all came under the physical general, and the physical general symptoms are also very important because they help when there are changes at the physical general level. Then we can easily, first there may be changes occur at the physical general level, and with the help of his physical generals we can able, these are helpful to find out the exact simillimum. So these things to take in detail, it is also very much important that while taking the case we should take in detail about the physical general symptoms. Then comes diathesis. What is diathesis? Diathesis, it is nothing but it is the acquired or inherited organic and systemic weakness. And due to that weakness, it may be inherited, it may be acquired weakness, it may be organic or systemic weakness, but due to these weaknesses, the certain diseases can attack the person. If there are defects in constitution or due to disease, due to appearance of disease, it causes some changes in the constitution of the patient, and this is nothing but the diathesis. Many times in the society we see that if we take the example of 100 people, so when the weather get changed, out of these 100 people, only 10 people they are suffering from cough cold, and other 19s they have not get affected by the sudden change in weather, because as these people also experienced, these people have get the similar stimuli, then also every individual they does not suffer, because there is a different response in different individuals for that stimuli or for that situation. So as each person is different, so there is different response for that stimuli. And if there is any stimuli at the physical or emotional level, then that stimuli, it may be stress, it may be anxiety, it may be any physical trauma, it was get filtered through our diathesis, and it will get reflected in the form of illnesses. It will reflected in different illnesses. So after getting affected by that stimuli, definitely there are some changes which takes place in the individuality of the or the personality or the constitution of that patient. And so these things are also very much important to note down while taking the case. Then different type of, after this diathesis it come diseases. So different type of diseases which the patient was suffering at present, or the patient was having these disease conditions in the past or since long period. So these disease conditions also we have to consider while taking or while selecting the similimum, because to find out what is the how the patient as a person and how these disease conditions they get affected on that person, how these disease conditions, what is the reason that the person he respond or he was suffering from, for example classical migraine, why he was suffering from migraine, what is the reason behind that migraine, is there any mental cause, is there any physical general, is the physical cause, what is the exact cause of this outwardly reflected condition. So to find out the exact reason of the migraine, we should know how what the condition the patient was suffering, from which condition the patient was suffering, so that we can reach or we can able to find out the exact root cause. And unless we cannot able to find out the cause of the suffering, till that the patient was not get cured. So what is our aim? Our aim is to cure the patient, to remove the disease from its whole extent, which was how it was possible. This was only possible when we first take the case in detail since his birth up to the present state, and then what is the present condition of the patient, what is the present suffering, we have to find out, and then we have to remove that cause of the suffering. Then only we can able to cure the patient permanently. So all these things, that is to find out the predisposition, disposition, mental state of the patient, his behavior in the family, with the society, at his workplace, what is his level, state of emotions, what is how he handle the situations, different events since his birth or since his childhood. Then what is his physical general symptoms, what about his thirst, desire, aversion, appetite, then what is his diathesis, and what the patient was suffering at present, with which symptoms. These all things are very much important. So while taking the case, it should contain the predisposition, disposition, diathesis, and details about the disease condition. So these things are very much important while taking the case. Cause of the disease is person's predisposition and disposition, particular diathesis in an unfavorable conditions. So first cause of disease is first cause of disease is we have to find out the cause of the disease. Then we have to find out the person's predisposition and disposition. Then what is his diathesis, particular diathesis in an unfavorable condition, and it gives rise to disease in due course. All these things affect on the person and they give rise the present state of the condition. They give rise some disease condition of the patient. So to find out what is the reason behind the disease present state of the patient, we should inquire about all these things, and then only we can able to cure the patient. Then line of concomitant, how we should find out the concomitant. So this is the middle transverse line. So what is middle transverse line? In that we have to consider the body which is at mental level, at physical level. We have to consider the mental generals, physical generals of the patient, and we have to consider the person as a whole, not his part, not his organ, not his system. So when we consider the person as a whole, then we get the concomitants related to whole person, because the concomitants, they are not for the part or organ or system. The concomitants are for the whole patient. So when we consider the whole patient, which when we consider the mentals, the physical general symptoms of the patient, then we get in detail. In short, when we take in detail the history of the patient, then we get the concomitants of the patient. When we examine each event in an isolated manner, we discover a number of characteristic features with identifying qualities for that event. So when we examine each event in isolated manner, in separate manner, then we can get a number of characteristic features about that event, and in this way, in short, we have to take each event in separate way in detail. Those expression of mental and physical plane noted above and below the line respectively. And not only we considered each event in detail, but what are the mental expression at that time of the patient, what are the physical expressions at that time in the patient, what is the mental general and physical general reactions which are given in this chart. So these are important things to find out. That means if there is any changes at the vital level, if there is any changes at the mental state, at the emotional state, then definitely it will reflected in the form of physical symptoms. So these physical symptoms, what is the exact reason behind these physical symptoms, we have to find out. And so we have to take in detail every event and the expression at his mental and physical plane for that event or during that event. This is also very much important. For example, we discussed this previously, that is sensitivity. It was expressed in the form of fear, which was expressed in the form of gossiping, cunningness of people, strangers, fear of strangers, fear of being alone. So this is nothing but the sensitivity. This is nothing but the fear. Then if there is workload at the workplace, or there is any stress at the workplace, then it may be reflected in the form of anxiety, in the form of worry. If there is history of repeated abortions, and when we go in detail about the history of the patient, then we find we can able to find out that the patient is very irritable, he is very violent, and he may complain of, or he may give history about his physical illness like headache or any other physical illness like repeated abortions. In this way it was get reflective. So this is important to find out what is the exact cause behind the present suffering. So the line of phase, that is cross line from left lower corner then to right upper corner, and with the help of these things we can able to find out the miasm behind the present condition of the patient. It represents the miasmatic march of event understood in terms of chronic diseases. So to know the miasmatic background, to know what is or which miasm is in the background, to know all these things, it is very much important. It represents the various phases of disease that many times the patient was first he was in sora, in soric state, then he returns from sora to psychosis, to tubercular. Then how or in which phase of disease the patient is, and which are the future or which future diseases the patient may, by which future conditions the patient may suffer. We can also able to predict these things with the help of miasmatic background. There are four types of miasm as we all know, that is sora, main four miasms, sora, psychosis, tubercular and syphilis. Then while taking the case, which are the prerequisites, we should find out the life space table, we should find out the life history of the patient from birth to present state, then classification form, Hahnemannian evolutionary totality, and conceptual image. How to fill up the case history form. So while filling up the case history form, we have to select the keywords of important events from live space table and put it on the event axis. Select important causes and happenings from LST and represent these in family, society, and work. Connect them to events. So, what is then it represents the expression at the level of mind and body as emerging out of those events on the concomitant axis. So, what is the expression at the level of his mind and body? We also should have to find out. Then we have to fill up the causal axis in terms of predisposition, disposition, diathesis, and disease. Classify them as per structure and function. Then connect causation from causal axis to events along with expressions on the concomitant axis at the level of mind and body. Then go to Anemonian evolutionary totality and connect different phenomenon of disease with the phase. And finally, we reach towards the conclusion that we are able to perceive the object in all dimensions of time. So, when we take or when we form the portrait of the patient, when we take the history of the patient in detail, then only we can able to perceive the object in all dimensions of time since his childhood, since his birth up to the present state. So to perceive the object in all dimensions, we should know or we should take the history from his childhood, from his birth up to the present state. And this will help to understand the problem definition in an integrated way. So we can able to understand what exactly is the problem. When we cut at any transverse level, we get a totality of events that guides us to see the specific problem at that given moment of time. Time dimension speaks of past, present, and future. So, with the help of proper case taking, with the help of studying different event at different time, we can able to speak on the past event, on the present event, and what is or what may be the future events or the future suffering. If worked out properly, gives the glimpses of all events in totality. The whole study represented in the scheme helps to portray the individual in terms of predisposition, disposition, diathesis, and disease. So, when we take the case in detail, then only we can able to find out the proper portrait of the individual in terms of predisposition, disposition, diathesis, and disease. It helps to integrate cause, effect, and concomitant phase in a single view. So to find out the cause, to find out the effect, to find out the concomitant in a single view, the detailed case taking is very much important. Then it helps to understand problem resolution. What is the problem and how to resolve that problem? This we can understand after proper case taking. Then different stages of disease, susceptibility, different approaches can be formulated. Then remedies, miasms, maintaining causes are also helpful. Constitutional or constitution of the patient, the sector, acute and intercurrent remedies, constitutional remedies, they are helpful to during working on the case. So in this way, the essential evolutionary totality, it is very much helpful to find out the history of the patient in detail, and when we take or when we consider the patient's history, or when we take the patient's history in such a way, then and then only we can reach towards the exact simillimum, and then only we can able to find out the, or then and then only we can able to cure the patient. So this is all about essential evolutionary totality.